Welcome to Living in the Matrix. I'm Jonathan, and I'm left of center.
And I'm Rich, and I tend to lean a little bit more to the right. But the bottom line is together we try to look for the balance of what it means to be human in today's world.
So this was a fascinating episode. Rich and I interviewed a gentleman named Kimmen, who is a practitioner of transcendence and a coach. He helps people overcome their own mind. And he does that by helping them separate themselves from what they think is their mind and what is actually their brain. And when you separate the two, you can begin to see your own sense of self-control. It's very powerful practice, which I highly recommend. Kimmen really touches on a lot of really important topics about healing and how to overcome suffering, how to actually work through that, the value of it from a masculine perspective as well as a feminine perspective. When we embrace the feminine, we actually improve the masculine. This is one fascinating episode, and I know you're going to love it.
Let's jump into this conversation. So for our listeners, I invited Kimmen, that's our guest today, to the podcast because Kimmen has just such a unique story about transcendence. And it's this emergence, and the way he described it to us is from atheism to
Awakening.
Kimmen, that's a fascinating story. Give me the highlight reel second of that. What was sort of the catalyst for you kind of taking that journey?
Well, it took a long time for me to realize that, but I had magic mushrooms when I was 20. And it made me, it was almost like a split in my consciousness. It felt like I could observe myself from above somewhere, above, beyond, behind, before somewhere. And I tried to verbalize, I tried to talk to my mates about it that I did the mushrooms with, and they didn't understand what I was saying. So I understood that it was something unique to my own experience. So I was in my body, but my consciousness was also above somewhere. So I was able to observe myself from a higher perspective. And obviously I didn't know anything about this sort of stuff because brought up in Sweden, like Sweden is the most atheistic country in the world. Like it's almost taboo. I'm not gonna say taboo, but it's a little bit weird when somebody says that they're a Christian or that they're religious. It's getting a lot better now, I think, which I think is a good thing. But back then it was more, it was a little bit strange if somebody said that they were religious. So that was the first initial thing, because after that, I guess the trip, when I had the mushrooms, it made me more humble towards people, more accepting, more open-minded, and it just made me a better person. But
what happened on your trip that captured?
And by the way, how big of a dosage did you take, Kimmen? Could you let us know that? Because that's a huge component.
I have no idea. We were just out just out in the woods in Sweden picking some mushrooms. I didn't know anything about it. Like we were just having fun, a couple of young guys in early 20s, just doing some crazy stuff. And obviously it's illegal in Sweden, so it's a little bit taboo. But people have no idea what these things can do to us. And I didn't know anything what to expect. I had no expectations whatsoever. And we were just laying on the floor. And I remember we were like, these sheepskin things that you can buy, like we just had those ones, and we were like dragging it across our faces and stuff, and we just we felt like Smurfs, I remember. And for some, all of us had just the best time ever, but it wasn't like some sort of a spiritual ceremony or anything like that, but something happened in me, and I didn't know anything about consciousness. I didn't know anything. I was still obviously attached to the idea of myself, still attached to the ego, still attached to the identity of Kimmen, if you like. But it made me more humble and made me better at not judging so much. And it made me just a better young man to be around. And then 5 years after that, I had what I call an awakening. Awakening is a bit of a word that people like to throw around, but I'll get to that later as well, what it actually means, or the definition behind a spiritual awakening. But 5 years after that, when I had my spiritual awakening, it happened in the gym when I was doing sit-ups. I watched myself from the same angle as I did when I did the mushrooms. So I was like, it was familiar in a sense. I'd been there before.
How would you describe that experience? What were you feeling in it? Because I understand what you're talking about. I call that oneness. I call that it's an awareness that you are accepted, and you don't have the tension in your body that you used to. It's like all of a sudden you're very present of this awareness that says you're supposed to be here. You're doing okay. And it's almost like a deep sense of peace that's very transformative. Is that what you experienced?
Sort of, but it was also a disidentification from Kimmen.
Yes.
What I thought,
what
I thought had been me my entire life. This voice in my head, right? The voice in our heads talking down to us all the time. The awakening happened in the gym. I was 25. It's about almost 6 years ago now. But I was doing sit-ups in the gym. I was going to do 3 sets and I was going to do 30 reps. But my voice, my ego, my identity has always been that I've been lazy. Never want to put in any hard work. Never want to do anything that's taxing. It's like I always wanted to do everything that was fun. Always taking shortcuts. Always taking the easy way out. And I was at set number 2 and I did like 15 reps of the sit-ups. And then my voice, the ego started telling me, all right, you're done now. You're tired. You're lazy. Remember that you're lazy. You need to go and, you're done. And I was like, oh yeah, because I thought that it was me saying that to myself, the ego talking to me, right? And I stood up and I was going to go grab my stuff. And I don't know what happened, but I came like halfway to my phone and I was going to leave the gym. And I just left my body again. Like I had the same out of body experience.
Almost a flashback. Like you almost were experiencing that same physiological experience, but it was obviously clearly the mushrooms weren't in your system anymore, but something else was going on, right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. But obviously then I didn't think, oh, this is the same thing as the mushrooms. Like it took a long time for me to, connect the dots sort of thing. But I left my body and I was like, who is this talking down to me? What is this voice? Get out of my head. Who's this telling me I'm lazy? I'm not lazy. What the fuck is this voice talking down to me? I'm not lazy. Like, so I went back and I was going to prove this voice wrong. Like, I'm not lazy. Why would I tell that to myself? Why would I make myself suffer? So I went back and I really pushed myself. First off, I started laughing. I was like, this is so weird. Like, this has been here all the time, but I'm now realizing that I'm not this voice in my head, right? So I guess it sort of like triggered this understanding of oneness, but for me it was like more a understanding that I am something more than my mind. I am the listener, observer, noticer of my mind. I'm not my mind. I'm the one listening to it. I don't have to be a part of it. So I went back and I really pushed myself, and then I laughed all the way home in the car.
At that moment, were you experiencing literally like a physical separation, or was it the sort of the awareness of the watcher?
Mental assent. Yeah.
That I'm separate from what's happening in my mind. That's that separation of the ego.
Correct.
Is that what you were experiencing?
Correct. There's one of me. There's 2 of me. One is a fraud, lives in here. We can call it the ego. We can call it the separate self, which creates all the problems in the world because everyone is identified with this all the time. Yeah. Greed, everything that makes us feel like we're lacking something. We're always lacking something when we are identified with this. Nothing is ever complete. It's like I need to attain something outside myself to make myself feel good about myself. Like goals, relationships, better salary, better, hotter girlfriend, like everything all the time. So a disidentification from that. It's also taken a lot of time to process that, but a realization that I'm not that voice.
So this is huge. You've unpacked so much of wisdom that people are striving for in such a very short period of time. And I want to kind of pivot into a little bit about meditation, but before that, it's because on our podcast, I had a good friend who's been doing Vedic meditation for 8 years. And this guy had never done shrooms in his life. He's my age. And he did 5 grams, which is considered more than a hero's dosage, right? That would be, you could fit 5 grams kind of in your hand like this, right? And he consumed it, and it wasn't a profound effect. So going back to a book he recommended, there's some studies at Johns Hopkins University with psilocybin, right? And a lot of these people that were on their deathbeds, they were stage 4 cancer patients, were given a massive dosage of mushrooms. And what they all experienced, some of them had the most important experience of their life. Some of them were agnostic or atheist, and they found this great oneness. And then they found that they lacked the fear of death anymore. Coming out of that experience, this dark blackness that they could see cancer, it just went away. Now, what my friend Byron said was when he took this 5 milligram dosage, because his mind was so tuned in Vedic meditation and a lot of different kind of advanced techniques, he said it was a neat experience, but it was an iterative effect. It wasn't like this mind-blowing cosmic realization that Alan Watts saw when he took LSD 25. Now, what I'm getting through all this is you were able to mentally see that we are not our mind. We are different. And this is something that's being repeated again and again in all kinds of great meditative processes. There's something called 10% Happier. It's a guy named Dan Harris. He had a mental breakdown in live news in front of the entire country. And he goes, I got to stop, right? So how would you suggest, outside of mushrooms for the uninitiated, but how would you describe like helping people realize that they are not their own mind, or that they are not their thoughts, right? How would you help somebody go down that path?
Well, with the coaching that I do, I help people to realize exactly this. So I ask them a question, but I don't want them to answer. So I can try this right now. Like I ask you guys a question, and then you stay quiet for a little bit, okay?
Okay.
So I say, do you have a voice in your head?
Yes.
Exactly. So you answer, but so you do have a voice in your head. And then I say, okay, who is that?
Mm-hmm.
And then some people might say, that's me. And then I say, okay, so if that's you, who is listening to it?
Mm-hmm.
And if that voice is you, if you remove that voice, do you disappear?
No.
Oh, okay. So you're still here then if you remove that voice. Yeah, I guess. Okay, cool. So you're not that voice. You know, so it's like creating a little bit of space in between you and your mind. And some people, like just me asking that question, some people just have this massive realization straight away. And for some people, they might think, oh, I don't have a voice. And then I say, okay, so can you say hello to yourself inside your head? Like, yeah. Okay, so you do have a voice in your head. And then you see what I mean? So it's like trying to put a little bit of space in between you as the consciousness, observer, awareness, whatever you want to call it, and your mind, or the ego, separate self.
Dr. Joe Dispenza has a really good understanding of that. It's just that's the difference between the brain and the mind.
Mm-hmm.
The mind is a construct of the default mode network, which is the operating system of your brain. It creates identity and keeps you safe. And until we separate ourselves from the mind, we are controlled by it because we think we are our thoughts. Oh my God, I thought of that thought. I shouldn't be thinking of that. I must be a bad person. And that separating is almost consistently like the ego death is an awareness that you are not your mind.
Correct.
Powerful shift. Now, you talked about how did it change? Because that's your awakening. How did that affect you coming from atheism? Like, what did that mean to you? What did all that mean?
Well, first of all, I didn't know there was a spiritual awakening that I had gone through. It took about 2.5 years until I realized it was an awakening. So I started, first of all, I started doing the opposite to what my mind told me to do all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
I wanted to prove it wrong. So I had this is a bit of a funny story, but I lost a lot of weight after that because I had a bad habit of I worked night shift at my old job then years ago, and I had a bad habit of going past McDonald's and going into the drive because every time I saw that sign, the big M, right, I was like, all right, I need to go in and have a Big Mac. But every time after my awakening, and I heard my ego say, "Go in and have a Big Mac," I was like, "Nope." I just drove past by or straight by because I knew that it was not me, you know. So it led me into this. First of all, I became very fascinated by psychology and self-improvement. I wanted to improve myself. I wanted to find my optimal potential, my fullest potential, and realize my most authentic self.
Did you do that? Did you go on that journey because you thought you were lazy, or because in your new spiritual state, you're realizing you actually are worth it? What was the catalyst for that?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, first of all, I wanted to prove myself, my mind wrong that I'm not lazy. And then what was the second question? Sorry.
You want to prove that you're not lazy, but there's also the growth component of that. It opens up when you separate yourself from your mind. It opens up so much possibility. What did that mean for you? Like, you're discovering this brand new world. I guess my question is, you stated you moved from atheism to spiritual awakening. What was that like for you internally, kind of like moving into this? Because spirituality is not just Christian or Catholic or any or faith. It's a human experience. What was that journey like for you?
The first 2 weeks was awesome. Like, it was great. Bliss, peace. I was like, I'm not my mind. Like, you know. Right. But I'm not sure if you heard something they call it a dark night of the soul in the spiritual community.
Yes.
And the reason what happens with awareness is that when you have a spark of increased awareness in your life, everything that you don't necessarily like about yourself or your own life is going to be brought up to light for you to be able to shine light on that, so you can let go of that. That's how you heal that. But so the months and even I'm going to say a couple of years after that was very hard, very tough, because everything that I didn't like about myself, I had a really bad habit of interrupting people, for example, which is like a lot of people do, right? But I was so hard on myself. Like, if I interrupted somebody talking, I almost felt a panic attack coming on, because I really wanted to get rid of everything that I didn't like about myself, so I could reach my fullest potential and become the best human person I could, right? So it was great, but it was very, very challenging. And I thought that I was going to go insane a couple of times. There was one instance where I was laying in my bed, and I heard this third voice coming to me. It wasn't me. It wasn't my ego. It was a third one. And it was like a golden warm feeling. I was having a panic attack at the time. And it just let me know that everything was going to be fine. But I was resisting it because I wasn't spiritual. I didn't believe in anything. I was like, oh, I'm not going crazy. I'm not going Christian, you know, because I had that sort of view of religion. Like, I thought that it was bullshit. So I was resisting it, which made me feel, I thought I was going crazy there for a while. But I was obviously being called by something. Yeah.
Would you call that God? Now,
Again?
or would you call that God now? What's the language you would use for people who have been in your shoes? Because that's the thing that is very common in the John Hopkins studies, is even atheists started realizing there's something more that's
love, like an all-encompassing feeling of love or oneness. Like, when you know that you are with everybody in creation and you're all on the same journey, and in the end, we're all going to be part of something bigger. I think that's a great relief, right? I mean, you also mentioned that you became a better person. So I'd love to hear, did you find when you became a better person after you took that, did you find that people were telling you, hey, what's up with you, Kimmen? You know, you listen more, you're more fun to be. What was the feedback? How did you know that you're becoming a better person? And yeah.
I think I had a tendency of being quite arrogant, maybe. And I think maybe a lot of young men probably are, to some degree, when we're a bit younger. Some men, at least younger men. It was just, I don't remember if somebody necessarily told me, but it was just the vibe, how people were interacting with me and how I was interacting with people. It was more of the vibe was higher. Like, I was caring more. I was more humble. I was listening, because I like to talk a lot, and when I was a kid, I spoke all the time. Like I didn't necessarily think that people could talk and I could listen, So it made me just better. It made me better to be like more pleasant to be around, I guess, sort of thing. Yeah.
Well, I think that's the thing. The journey is especially a man, because we tend to live in our minds, is the ego has a desire to be seen.
Correct.
And I think talking, because I am the same way. It's the talk to be heard for validation, and I think that's it's hard to step away from that, because that's our primary source of validation. We validate ourselves through our self-talk. Like, I am a smart guy. I can do a lot of things. So and that was a thing for me when I started realizing that sense of oneness. I realized the oneness, which I call the unified field, or some people call the kingdom of God or heaven or whatever they want to call it. There was full acceptance in that space. Every time I interacted with that space, there was, you're already good enough. You don't have to do more. And that was so counter to my ego that what was it like for you?
That was a later realization for me. That was actually quite a recent realization for me, because I've always identified with being a high achiever as well. Next, chasing the next shiny thing, which is very common for men too, to believe that happiness is just around the corner. But this whole journey eventually led me into realizing that instead of you chasing a goal ahead of you, and that horizon of that goal is always going to move forward. It's never going to be like, you're never going to arrive. You're never arriving.
Yeah.
So I started seeing myself as the goal. So instead of me chasing something ahead of me all the time, I saw myself being pushed forward by my achievements instead, which was a massive shift. So like, instead of chasing a goal, I am the goal. I don't need anything. I have everything I need already. I just want everyone else to have what I have or what I have found.
That's fascinating, because I think Jonathan and I were smiling because we had a guest on who talked about pulling that goal towards you. See, you can chase the goal, but then when you kind of manifest and you try to envision what that looks like, it's actually coming to you effortlessly, right? That's and you've talked about this in some of your reels about, you have to do things that are intuitive, right? So when there's pain and there's death, you lean into that and you cry and you weep with people. You embrace the pain of loss instead of pushing it down. You relive that trauma of an assault, a sexual assault. And what you do is you embrace it, because if you don't, it's going to keep coming back again. And so you have to be free of it. And so I think whatever we are, whether we're dealing with pain or we're chasing or trying to bring a goal to us, it's the same line of thought, right? It's effortless, but it's also not, Jonathan, we talk about letting go, right? Dr. Hawkins, and that, like, if you obsess and lust after something over and over, it's going to slip through your fingers. But the minute you kind of give in and let the universe do what it's supposed to do, and then you just focus on being the best person you can be, it will come to you, right?
100%. You are being pulled towards your goal.
Yes.
Like the goal is pulling you, right?
Yes.
Yeah. 100%.
Kimmen, you talked about trauma in your notes. What was that about? What was that notation about? Did you experience trauma?
Big time. Yeah, I've had some really dark trauma that I had. It took me 8 years to heal that. And it was actually, I was experimenting with drugs a lot when I was younger. And I had a really, really bad psychedelic trip. I thought that reality was a dream, and I thought that the trip was reality. So I had to kill myself to wake up to the dream, to the trip. Does that make sense?
You can kill yourself in your trip.
Yeah.
Almost like
so when I came back, started coming back from the trip, I thought that the trip was reality. and that I had to kill myself to wake up to the trip again, because I thought that I was dreaming when I was awake, which obviously caused, because I obviously not suicidal or anything,
Of course.
but it made me feel extremely bad about that situation. But that was one of the best things that ever happened to me, because it pushed me to, first of all, into whatever I'm doing, whatever I'm helping people with. I'm helping people with trauma. And trauma is just thoughts and emotions that you don't want to process, that you don't want to take a look at. Like, it will keep coming back. I always say that trauma is like a dog that's chasing you. Like, the dog's going to run after you. The more you run, the more the dog is going to chase after you. But all you need to do is to just turn around and give it some love and attention, and it'll go away. So that's how you actually heal trauma. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's not going to be awesome. It's going to suck. But you just have to give it some love and attention and compassion.
Well, the hard part about trauma is that it's an experience. All trauma is an experience you don't think you can handle.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true.
Correct.
So
Good one.
The hardest part of it is, I've been studying my own trauma for 30 years. And it really comes down to that, is I don't think I can handle it. But here's the interesting part about it, is that your mind creates an electrical impulse, and then it goes down to your heart so you can feel it, but that creates a chemical response. Most people think psychology is just what's in your head. It's not. It creates electrical charges in your body that create chemical responses, and basically what it does is create stress, and stress is the #1 human disease. It's basically the beginning of inflammation, which leads to cancer. And we don't realize when we store. I was having dinner with a friend last night, and he was talking about his journey as a fireman dealing with PTSD. Like, he's seeing beheadings all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And he said when he first started the job, he couldn't handle it. And then he realized, as a fireman, no, you got to learn to handle that. You can either stuff it down, which is they call the knapsack. And each trauma is this electrical start stuffed in a knapsack. And he goes, guess what? When you have a knapsack full of electrical charges that are negative in your body, they're going to fuck you up.
Mm-hmm.
And letting it first, opening up that knapsack and realizing, oh, I can handle this, is the journey.
Yes.
And it's getting to a place where you can say, oh, it sucks, but I can handle it. How did you get there, Kimmen?
It took me a while it was probably 2.5 years after my awakening when I started opening up my heart more. And basically, a heart opening means that you have to go through everything all the emotions that you've been pushing down. So I was having a massive panic attack with my ex-girlfriend at the time, and I just started talking about everything to her, which was the best thing I have ever done. It felt like I took off a backpack with 50 kilos filled with rocks, or 100 pounds, whatever.
Yeah.
Yep. And I just felt like
people don't realize that is true. When you confess,
yeah,
you unload.
Yeah.
And it feels like that. You literally feel like you've left the knapsack behind.
And the problem with men is that we tend to think that vulnerability is weakness.
Yes.
But men also tend to grow from challenges. So what is the biggest challenge for a man? Is it to keep pushing everything down, or is it to actually start sharing and showing ourselves as weak? I don't like that word, but if we use that word loosely, obviously the biggest challenge is going to come off as weak. So we will grow and heal by sharing our truth and being a little bit vulnerable. Vulnerability just means to be authentic, express everything that is hurting you or making you feel good, or strengths, weaknesses, whatever. So for me, it was just like talking to her about it, which made me realize that, I don't have to protect my own pain. I don't have to be shameful of my shame. Because the weird thing with trauma is that we think that we need to hide it from the rest of the world. Like, this is my pain. I'm not going to show anybody this pain. And if anybody's like poking us, you need to talk about this. Oh, don't touch my trauma. Don't touch my pain. This is my pain. Like, that's the typical reaction with trauma. But that eventually led me to realizing that I don't have to be scared of lower vibe emotions. Like, I don't have to fear lower vibe. Because most humans have this idea that I'm just supposed to live human life with a 50% positive emotions, the good feeling emotions, right? So we neglect 50% of the unpleasant ones, the negative ones. There's no such thing as negative or positive emotions, but you know what I mean.
I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, we need to, like, if we want to become the best we can at being ourselves, we need to feel the whole spectrum of human emotions. Like, we don't have to be scared of fear. It's nothing dangerous. Like, it's not dangerous to feel trauma. It might be fucking uncomfortable, but it's not dangerous. So we need to teach our mind and our nervous system that, oh, this is shame. Cool. I'm just going to sit here and feel shame for a bit. And when you do that, the shame goes away. Yeah. So this has led me into doing a practice where I go into meditation and I start recreating shame out of nowhere. Like, what does shame feel like? What does guilt feel like? What does fear feel like? Feel that. So this teaches the nervous system that it's just emotions. And the more efficient we get at feeling the lower vibe emotions, the more we will open up to feeling the higher vibe as well, like peace and joy and love and all those. You mentioned Richard, what's his name?
Hawkins?
The author of Letting Go. Yeah,
David Hawkins.
Exactly. And it's so true. Like, we just have to learn how to feel every emotion, and we're gonna become one step closer to becoming our optimal, most authentic selves. Because if we don't fear any emotion, we will be unstoppable in life. Because what life basically is just emotions all the time. It's like we stay away from things because it's gonna give us certain emotions, and we pursue certain things because it's gonna give us other pleasant emotions, right? So nothing exists outside of emotional states. So if we can learn how to feel everything, we're gonna be the best we can.
What you were starting to do was you were starting to talk about letting the emotions come in. That's typically a feminine kind of thing, right? Men are left side of the brain, women are female side of the brain. And
Correct.
one of the things that's been coming up recently is embracing the divine feminine, or embracing the feminine side and not being afraid of that. Sean Clayton talked about Age of Aquarius, but you've been talking about embracing this. And even what's so funny is we've lived in a Western worldview of a kind of a patriarchal kind of system. And even in the Bible, God is always depicted as a man, when in fact, there's a verse in Genesis where the spirit of God is hovering over the waters. That's a feminine word in the Hebrew. It's feminine. And then there's sometimes God is seen as feminine, but it seems to be pushed aside. So how would you kind of describe embracing those emotions and trying to tap? How would you help a guy not feel weird about trying to embrace the feminine?
Well, I would explain it like this, because when we invite the feminine in, we actually become more masculine, or better at being masculine, rather.
Yes.
So that's the first thing I say. And then the second thing is that if you're completely comfortable feeling the unpleasant emotions, you're going to become the best pillar for women or the feminine to lean on.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's a good man. Like, I think that a good masculine man is supposed to be the rock, the pillar for, if things really go down, then the feminine and their offspring can lean on the man. That's why Stoicism, I think, is really good for men to learn. It doesn't have anything to do with being cold or being shut off. It means that we're able to feel emotions without being so attached to them or becoming the emotions. Like, just because I feel anger, I don't become angry. Just because I feel grief, I don't have to start weeping and bawling my eyes out. It can mean that, but it means that we create safety for the feminine, so she can trust. If the feminine can trust the masculine to be, he got it under control all the time, I can lean on him, then that creates the best relationship dynamic in my opinion.
100%.
Who do you typically coach? Do you work with mostly men, or do you work with both?
Mostly men, yeah. I've had a couple of women, but mostly men. I probably because they can relate possibly a little bit more, but I actually have more followers, more female followers on my Instagram. It's not too much more, but yeah, it's a little bit more female followers.
What would you say to a guy who hasn't had a sense of separation of the ego, realizing they're the watcher? What would you say to a guy who's like, my life is fucked up, I don't know what to do, I know something's broken inside? What would you say to someone like that is looking for your help?
When was the last time you challenged yourself?
I love it.
That's what I would say.
Yeah. Because
most guys
respond
would
to
say,
challenge.
That's not in video games. That's not an Xbox challenging yourself for a better score, right?
Yes.
That's not what I'm saying at all. I would say, because men are, generally speaking, men are more driven by dopamine. And that's why video games are so addictive. Because we think
And
the
porn.
mind thinks,
And porn.
and porn, exactly. Because the mind thinks that it's achieving something, when in reality, you're not achieving anything. You're just sitting doing absolutely nothing. So complete a challenge, not online, but in real life. Like, go and face your fears. That's why facing your fears is so amazing for men, because it requires courage. Courage is the bridging emotion in between low vibe and high vibe. So courage is the gateway to high vibe.
Yes.
That's why if you're depressed, face your fears. Challenge yourself.
So you haven't read Hawkins, have you, Dr. Hawkins?
I have read the book Letting Go.
Okay, there you go. So yeah, you just described that. I mean, but what's funny is that if we're all aligned in the same kind of set of consciousness, you'll actually understand these concepts even without actually the prior knowledge. So Jonathan has his place of transcendence in a different way than I do. I need to go back to my transcendental meditation because it's 20 minutes twice a day, and it's one little mantra that I don't ever have to worry about. It's been the easiest thing for me. And one of the things that's is crazy, and I'm going to ask you this, but I'm going to tell you the story first. I took ketamine, right, many, many times because Jonathan said, hey, you want to do something to kind of reset your brain a little bit. I didn't do it just to goof off at a party. One day, I don't know what I did. Maybe I took more of a dosage, or maybe I'd watched crazy show ahead of time, but I went into a K-hole, which is this place of you feel trapped. It's a place where, kind of like the trauma you were talking about, but I wasn't suicidal. But here's what was weird. I actually got up because I was in my room. I said hi to my daughter who just got home, and I went back into my room and I laid back down, and all of a sudden I started looking at my fan and iterations of itself. And I felt like I was in the Matrix, and I started freaking out like, okay, this is done now. I could just get up. And all of a sudden, why can't I feel my hands and my feet, which I normally can? Okay, I'm trying to get out. I'm trying to get out. And I couldn't get out. And then something in me, in my brain, because I've been meditating, which separates thoughts from who you are, is, you know what? I might actually have fallen and hit my head and bleeding out in a curb, or I might be dead. I don't think it fucking gives them, it doesn't matter. Everything's going to be okay. And then all of a sudden, it just literally, I don't know how, but it got better. And I just wrote it out. I go, I'm going to ride this thing out. And I think that the question I was going to ask for you is, do you think if you had been meditating prior to that really traumatic psychedelic experience, that you still would have felt suicidal? Or do you think that, tell me if you think that had happened, that you would have had that same traumatic event had you been meditating for a lot longer period of time?
No, I don't think so, because meditation creates space in between us and our traumas, right? So I was so new to, that trip was actually after the first initial mushroom trip that I told you about.
Oh, okay.
So I still had some sort of understanding there, but like I said, I was so new to this whole thing. I didn't know anything about consciousness or spirituality or anything like that, or self-improvement. So
now your entire life is built on it.
Basically, yeah. It's a healthy obsession I have about it. It's all I do. But yeah, I think that if I was obviously a little bit more experienced in this type of work, it wouldn't have been that bad. But it took a long time to heal that trauma. And I didn't go suicidal. I just want to point that out with the trauma. I didn't go suicidal or anything. It was just when I woke up from the trip, I thought that I had to jump from the balcony to kill myself to wake up in the trip. Like, it was weird, which obviously I didn't make me suicidal after that, but I had PTSD and recurring thoughts about this sort of stuff, which haunted me for 8 years or something like that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But it was important for you to go through that, and I don't think you would change it, would you?
It's absolutely not. It's the best thing that's ever happened to me.
Yeah, it's like a gauntlet. You experience something that was insurmountable. You either face it or die, and you chose to face it. And I think that's what every human being, because this isn't just a masculine, although I've worked with men for 30 years. We need that challenge and sense of capacity to say we can. And I think that's what's really great about the ego death is the ego death is life's greatest challenge. Because when you can separate the brain from the mind and realize, oh, I don't have to be controlled by my ego. Now it's this dance of how do you, because I don't think we kill the ego. I think we reduce the ego to what it was originally intended to be, which was, hey, it helps you get out of the way of the running car that's coming towards you. Like, that's simple. You don't need it to be something grander than that.
Yeah.
It's meant to be. So we don't kill the ego. We bring it back into health.
Agreed.
By separating.
Can I add something?
Go ahead.
Yeah, because the ego, it's always identifying with past experiences.
Yes, it can only identify with past experiences because it basically is the default mode network is essentially human AI.
Exactly.
It's a pattern recognition machine that can only read from the past. It cannot innovate. It cannot be intuitive. It cannot create. It can only deal with what it knows. Yet the real self, who we really are, can tap into creativity, can tap into intuition to bring about the new. That's why the separation is really important.
Exactly. And there's another little mind exercise I do with people too, to make them realize this. If you guys would live, if your consciousness would be in my body, for 24 hours, you would see all my flaws, all my insecurities, all my traumas, all my memories, all my experiences, everything. You would not suffer from my life. You would not suffer from my experiences because it didn't happen to you.
Right.
Yeah.
You would probably have a better understanding, empathy, sympathy, whatever, for me in my life, but you wouldn't suffer from it because you wouldn't identify with it. So we only suffer to the degree of how much we identify with our own experiences. So if we can apply this into our own life, it's like, why do I walk around and identify with this? It's all images in the head of past events that has happened, and I identify with it. It's like, it's not here. I can't touch it. It doesn't exist. So we need to learn how to disidentify from it.
Yeah, that's huge because, and this is why trauma is so mental. So for instance, let's say, I was thinking about a poor woman who might be, let's say, assaulted or grabbed. There's somebody wielding a knife, I believe, in Times Square the other night, and I don't know if somebody got slashed or not, but anyway, imagine if you cut yourself on your hip by running into an object in the kitchen, and it hurt and it bled and it left a bruise, and then you got chased by this guy who happened to swipe at you and hit it. Same kind of cut, same kind of bruise with the blunt trauma of the knife, same wound physically. But the trauma of what happened in that Times Square, assault is gonna jack you up for a lot longer, right? Because of the fear that comes with it. The physiological trauma is the same, and in fact heals up within a few days. But the mental state, and that's why we've got to grow the mind, right? And we talk about so often in young men hear about got to get the body in good shape. If you don't get the mind in good shape, it doesn't matter how strong you are. If you're still chasing all those guys, you watch. I mean, Schwarzenegger's got a documentary on Netflix, and you just look at these guys, and it's all pure ego, right? They're just chasing that dream instead of just comfortable where they are. But anyway, that's a great point you just brought up there, Kimmen.
I can add something too there. Like how do we disidentify from the mind? And that is how that's why it's so important for us to learn how to feel every emotion on the human spectrum, right? Because when we are stuck in low vibe, we are stuck in time. Because the ego always see low vibe as survival. I need to move out of here, and it's very linear. You're living in linear time when you live in low vibe. But the higher you climb, the more higher vibe, like love, for example. Love is a very high vibe emotion. Yes. Love is basically creating space in between you and the ego. So the more high vibe you feel in your body, the higher emotion you feel, the more space you're going to have in between yourself as the consciousness and the ego. That's why it's so important to learn to feel everything. and to learn what it's like to fall in love with love,
Yes.
sort of thing.
To have
If you
that
can-
feeling of fear, like that you do when you meditate. I'm embracing the fear so that when I encounter the fear, I can separate and I can act in the moment. You're trying to pull off a Tom Cruise Dianetics without being in Dianetics.
Correct.
He's in an interview and he goes, I'm driving by a car crash out there and everybody's freaking around and, there's blood everywhere. And I'm the only person in the room that knows what to do. It's like, okay, I think you can get there in other ways, Tom, But I love that. And people don't realize that the brain flexes. It can be worked out, right? So when you meditate, you are doing those things which help you to identify what that ego is, what that low vibration is, what those fear lower things are, and separate them. And that's when you really transcend. And that's when you become consciousness, right?
Correct.
And nothing else gets in the way of that.
Love
awesome.
makes you go, low vibes such as fear makes you go linear. It's like I need to move forward to get myself out of this situation. And love makes you go quantum. It's like I don't need anything. I'm already everything I'm looking for. And the fact is that everyone is always what they look for. And we're all the same. We're all one.
Well, here's the chasm. And I think the chasm is sort of a human condition, is when you separate yourself from the person you thought you were for your entire life, that is a new realm. Who the hell are you? And it's like that, it creates a void that most people are afraid of, because the reality is that all this stuff does create pain. And
Correct.
if you have never learned to handle pain, your life is going to suck. It is, because you don't have any capacity to deal with the separation, to say, I am not my ego. Oh my God, who am I? And love comes in and says, you're I am.
Yeah.
It's like one good thing to have in mind is that when you feel like you're going insane, you're onto something good.
Yes.
Yes.
When you feel like you're losing your mind, when you feel fear of something, I'm losing all my memories. When you have that fear, keep feeling that fear. Don't push that down, because that fear is going to be driving
Lean into that. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
And fear is just a chemical reaction.
Correct.
All it is. It's
Correct.
a chemical reaction from the thought you allowed your brain to have. And if you separate yourself and say, I am not my thoughts, I will have thoughts, but I am not my thoughts. I don't identify with my thoughts. And you separate them, you realize, oh, I literally just have to wait about 90 seconds till the dopamine wears off, and then I'm okay. Most people don't even know that. Most people don't know. If you have some major traumatic event, what keeps you stuck is not the event, it's your rumination of the event.
Yeah.
They get stuck in it.
Yes.
Yeah.
But if you stop it and go, oh, let's just see what happens. 90% of what probably thought is going to happen never actually happens. Like my wife and I talk about this all the time, how much we worry about things that never happen.
Yes.
Like that's stress on the body. It's the same thing. 90% of what you're afraid of never happens.
Exactly.
Well, that's a thing too that I use with I'm going to touch on that, what you said about fear there. I always say that fear works just as a compass to reaching your most optimal authentic self.
Yes.
If you're scared for something, then that's exactly what you need to do to become more authentic, right? And also one thing with worry or creating worst case scenario thoughts, images, whatever, is that the difference between worry, fear, there's no difference in between worry or fear or excitement. It's exactly the same thing.
Chemical reactions.
Yeah, it's exactly the same thing. It's the same emotion. The difference is that when you are fearful of something or worried, you have a negative view of the outcome in your head. You have a negative image of the outcome.
Yeah.
But if you are, but if you have a positive image of the outcome, you become excited. So if you stand before a challenge, for example, if you say that you're gonna go and do some public speaking or whatever, and you feel nervous, it's because you have a negative view of maybe being mocked by the crowd.
Yes.
But if you swap that image to I'm going to be cheered,
yes,
then you will be excited instead. Which one is the truth? None of them, because it's all made up. It doesn't exist. But we can hack that. Obviously, being excited, your vibe is going to be much higher. You're going to be more confident. So you can just go in with the mindset of this is going to be awesome instead of having the image of this is going to go bad.
Do you still have cortisol levels increased, Jonathan? Because when we talk about fight or flight, when we're about to get into a fight or run away from a bear or wake up like a firefighter in the middle of the night, the cortisol. One of the terrible things about being a firefighter is you're in the dead of sleep, and you got that alarm wake you up out of nowhere. Does the cortisol level increase even if you're excited versus when you're scared? So physiologically, do you still have those same things in your brain?
No, they're the exact same thing. So this is what Dr. Dispenza called, it's the loop, it's the thought loop, where you wake up from the alarm, you have a thought about it. It's the interpretation of that thought in your body that creates the chemical reaction. And then it goes back to your mind to assess it. When it comes back here, that's when you make the good or bad judgment.
Got it.
And so it's that third loop, it's that third moment. You start thought, feeling, thought. That third or second thought is where you make that judgment, because the first is just an awareness. Second,
knee-jerk reaction. That's almost like autonomous.
Right. And the feeling of excitement and fear are exactly the same chemically.
Yes.
But it's what judgment do you bring after the fact? And this is, Kimmen, this is why I am still deeply attracted to Jesus, is because Jesus said, start with love. Start with the very best possibility every single moment of your life and see what happens. And if you do, it will create this fruit that will blow your mind.
Mm-hmm.
And the end game of that fruit is self-control. That's why I'm attracted, because it's the most encapsulating story of confronting fear, dealing with faith, because you need faith. You need to believe that you are worth it.
Yeah.
And once you do, you discover, oh my God, everybody's worth it.
Yeah.
We're all part of the unified field, every one of us. And so I want to jump back in terms of, you started as an atheist. Where are you now? Where do you see yourself?
Talk about, where are you?
Not that I want to convert you. I don't. I want to just hear your perspective.
I love all there's teachings in every religion that I like.
Exactly.
I wouldn't call myself religious, and spirituality is just another label as well. It's just another identity for the ego. So it's like, I'm spiritual. Sometimes that creates another label for the ego to identify with, but I would say that I'm just more aware than I used to be.
Yeah.
Well, what's so funny is, as I've dove into transcendental meditation, and I don't go to church anymore the same way I used to go to church. I used to be at church 4 days a week, right? And I've been told by my kids and my wife that I'm a better guy now than I was, when I was running around teaching and doing all this stuff. And I think that's all the ego. That's all the linear stuff. You're just doing the busybody stuff and trying to make sure you check all the boxes and you do all your stuff. It was a works-based, almost righteousness kind of thing, right? Where now it's like, wait a minute, if I focus on myself and then others, I'm living that life I'm supposed to. And I think that's why it's so confusing. And Jesus doesn't care which way you do it, as long as you bring love into the equation, right? And right?
It's like, look at how good I am at being spiritual. Look at how good I am at going to church. Look at how good I am. And you're craving this egoic validation, need for validation, right?
Yes.
Like, I'm such a good spiritual person, says the separate self.
Yes.
Like, okay, who's the one noticing those thoughts coming to you? What is behind all that sort of stuff, right?
Yes.
It doesn't come from here. It doesn't come from the mind. It sits behind somewhere.
Yeah.
Mind, body, spirit, right?
A lot of people talk about we're entering the age of Aquarius, which is a feminine age. Okay. And I think historically, you could even look at Jewish scripture and say there's ideas of ages. What do you think is happening right now? Do you see there's a bigger emergence going on with this awareness that we're all experiencing? What's your take?
I think that it's almost two realities existing at the same time on the planet right now.
Okay.
We have people waking up and trying to we're realizing that whatever we have been doing right now is not working. Like, all the systems that are in place are not working. We have the schooling system, we have the banking system, we have the food industry, we have the big pharma, we have big tech. Like, it does not work. And a lot of people are waking up to this. And I think that COVID was a good catalyst for that.
Mm-hmm.
To realize that, okay, there are some things that I don't agree with. And we have given way too much power to people it's like we have given authority to people, but people shouldn't have authority over other people. People are just people. We're all the same. And then we have the people that are still, I guess, stuck in their own minds, and they believe everything that they think. They believe in everything that they have in their head, and what they are being told by authorities. And I think that if you want to be a healthy human, you need to start questioning things again. You need to even start questioning your own mind. It's like, don't hold so hard, like don't grip so hard to the truth, what you perceive as the truth, because it might, something might exist outside of your current awareness that's going to be better for you to make your life better. But if you grip like too hard to the truth, if you hold on too closely to the truth, what you perceive as the truth, then you won't be able to learn anything new. So I think that there are two realities at once. There's one that's still stuck a little bit, and no judgment, but those people will suffer. They will continue to suffer. And then you have one reality that is starting to realize, people waking up to the truth. It's like, okay, we're one human species here on the planet. Isn't the most intelligent, logical, optimal way for us to be, to show each other, to show ourselves love and compassion? Isn't the most intelligent way for us to actually start cooperating? Like if we can see each other as, if we can learn to, okay, we live on this planet here, we are alone as a species against everything else. Shouldn't we try and cooperate and live in the best way possible through harmony instead of chaos and destruction? But unfortunately, all our leaders are basically still identified with ego and separate self. Yeah. They believe that they can gain something through greed and power, which they believe that they're going to make themselves better somehow, which is just an illusion created by the separate self or the ego, which is not true.
Yeah. You know, it's interesting. A lot of people see Klaus Schwab and, you know, the likes of the World Economic Forum and the likes of even Bill Gates, who is a technologist trying to change the world through vaccines. And I tend to believe that I think they're asking for too much power. Some people think that they're maniacal, evil people, and others, I think, say, no, I think they want to do what's best for the planet, but they're just misguided. And so I think the more and more opportunities we have to open up minds, I think that collective will end up taking over. And we actually saw the Hague. We also saw the collapse of the Dutch government, right? People are fed up with what's going on in the Netherlands in terms of the farmers and all that stuff. And so people are starting to wake up to this. And even with the Ukrainian war, you know, Zelensky was hoping that we were just going to bring him into NATO and everything was going to be fine. They're like, not so fast, because if we go down this path, there might be some really serious repercussions. But I wanted to ask you, you had a thought about what it means to be a man. So we talked about this overarching kind of global thing and where we are. And I love what that was, but let's wrap things up here on talking about what it means to be a healthy, you know, loving man in 2023. What are your ideas?
Well, first of all, I think that a lot of men are very lost because a lot of men have been sold this thing from society that we are not needed anymore. And obviously we need that because we're like 4 billion men on the planet right now. Why would we neglect 50% of people? Obviously, like I said before, the most optimal way for us to function as a society is for us to embrace each other again and utilize each other's indifferences. We're so distracted as men. We're jerking off to porn, we're playing video games because we're being pushed by society that we don't need men anymore. Yeah. But being a healthy man, in my opinion, is to start challenging yourself again. Start facing your fears. Do hard shit that is going to scare you and become the best you can at being yourself. Start doing things that is not always super fun, and embrace everything. Embrace yourself, embrace your emotional states, learn what it's like to open up and share and talk about stuff. And I would say that we need to stick up for each other again. Like, women need to understand that it's people in general, but a lot of women need to understand that it's different to be a man than it is being a woman. And I think that if we can learn evolutionary psychology again, if men can teach themselves how women think and how men think in general, and if women can do the same, if women can teach them, or can learn how they think, what is driving femininity and what is driving masculinity, we will realize that we are very different. And I think that because divorce rates have never been higher, ever.
Yeah.
And there's obviously a reason to that. Like if women and men become exactly equal in everything, we're not going to attract each other anymore. For example, men desire women in a different way than how women desire men. So I think just by learning evolutionary psychology, what is driving us as men, what is making you tick? Oh, why am I so addicted to this video game? Well, maybe it's because I'm driven by dopamine.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm supposed to go out and challenge myself. Maybe I'm supposed to go out and accomplish things in real life. And it obviously looks different for everyone. But when we start doing that, like I said, we tap into courage, which is the gateway to higher vibe emotion, which is going to make you feel better.
Yes.
Kimmen, I really appreciate you coming on. Please come back. You have been an absolutely fantastic conversation, because we are all interested in what it really means to challenge ourselves, because we speak to a lot of men. We have a lot of men on here. And I think you've really touched on sort of a capstone. It really is about, hey, we need to grow up. We need to start challenging ourselves and become actual men. Being a man is not about how many women you can sleep with. It's how many people you can ultimately take care of and be love for people, be a stable force in the family.
I want to finish with one thing that has to do with, or that will make you feel good if you're a man that is struggling right now. And that is that the masculine wants to feel needed and capable and powerful. Needed, capable, and powerful. How can you achieve those three things in your own way? What can you do to make yourself feel more capable? What can you do to make yourself feel more needed? Valued is another word.
Yes.
And what can you do to make yourself feel more powerful?
Right.
Challenge yourself.
Work on one at a time if you need to, right?
Yeah.
But all three would be the best, right?
Yeah. And I would love to come back. This has been great. I would love to come back and go a little bit deeper in the, like, how you can transcend and in a spiritual way too. But I think starting off with courage is massive.
It's required. You have to start with courage. That's the beginning of positive action.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Kimmen, thank you. And to all our listeners, please feel free to review, comment, and share. We'd love to get some feedback on the podcast. We have a total blast doing this. Thank you, Kimmen. Thank you, Rich. Rich, you want to say any final words?
Yes. If you are afraid of scary Sundays, all we got to do is stop thinking in the low vibration, fearful stuff, and let's move on. Let's bring our best selves forward, and let's go.
Oh yeah, Kimmen, how can people find you?
We got you on Instagram.
Yes. How can people find you?
ItsKimmen. So it's Kimmen, if that makes sense. Instagram tag is ItsKimmen.
Do you do a podcast?
I don't, but I'd love to start doing it for sure. Yeah.
Well, definitely come back. We'd love to have you.
I will. Thanks a lot.
All right. Much love, everyone.
Cheers.
Cheers.